Today's episode is presented by LodeStar, the fee experts.
Yeah, let me close this. All right, there we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Lending Leaders Podcast. We have a three-time guest, a good friend of mine today, Matt Einheber, owner, founder, principal at TitleEQ. I'll let him talk about himself a little bit. I know, Matt, we wanted to call this the market corner. I know we have you on anytime we have something interesting and topical to discuss.
Yeah, which I appreciate. I'm starting to feel like a regular. It's always welcome. Like that old show Cheers, you walk in, they go, Norm,
everyone knows your name. Yeah, you're a friend of the pod, as they say.
Right.
So, yeah.
I like it.
So, what have you been up to, since the last time we talked too with, I forget if you were at TitleEQ formerly or not, last time we had you on.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when it was, but we've been up to a lot. We've been expanding TitleEQ quite a lot as a direct agency. We're now in a number of states with direct operations. We're doing a lot of larger commercial transactions throughout the country, all over the place. We opened up other offices, I think, maybe since we spoke. So we've got an office in Dade County now in Florida, 2 in Pennsylvania, and one coming very, very soon, like any minute now, in Texas as well. So we got a lot of stuff happening. Yeah, a lot of great things.
And in all the hot markets. And you recently had a raise too. Congratulations. I know I texted you on that. So
yeah, thank you.
Tech-enabled title companies. Everyone's crazy about them, right?
Yeah, they still are. I mean, at least for us, we're doing some interesting things, and obviously we're doing so kind of with the wind in our face, I guess you could say, with regards to the market and the year we're having, which I think, in the short run, people look too short, but in the long run, I think it's a positive thing. A lot of really great companies are built out of the trough of, of an economic cycle. And I haven't wavered from that at all.
Yeah. Well, hey, wind in the face is how planes take off, right? Isn't that like what they always do, go into the wind? So
I like that one. Never heard it, but I'll use it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was some airlines commercial, but anyway, topical matters. So we wanted to talk about the recent Realtor Commission decision that went against NAR in Missouri. I think now it'll be about a month or so ago that came down in October, and kind of all of the implications. So to, really briefly summarize, it's pretty much convention across the country that the seller pays 6%, and that 6% gets split between the realtor they hire and then whoever the buyer's realtor ends up being. So 3% to the buyer, 3% to the buyer's realtor, 3% to the seller's realtor. Maybe it's 2.5%, maybe it's lower in some cases, but for the most part, that has never changed. Even as mortgage rates change, even as prices skyrocket, that has remained the same. There was whether it be collusion or just that is not allowed. You're basically setting a price for something that buyer doesn't have any opportunity to or that seller doesn't really have the opportunity to shop for, right? It's illegal to make the seller pay for that because they're not getting the true benefit of it. That should be something that the buyer figures out on their own. Is there anything you want to add to kind of the, initial ground laying there?
I mean, that's the initial. I have a whole lot of things to add about it, but I mean, that's certainly the groundwork for what we're talking about here and what this case is. Yeah.
And what was kind of your first reaction when that happened? I know it made some national news. It made a bit of a splash around Halloween.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching this case for a couple of years. I think it's been going on for close to 2, maybe longer than 2 years. But I know I've been watching it pretty closely for 2 years, and I've said to people around me, like, keep your eye on this thing. This is a big deal. But I wonder. I have a lot. I'll flip flop on the whole thing because I'm not going to say, well, this is what's going to happen. I think a lot of people are out there saying, like, this is what's going to happen, and obviously there's fear mongers out there, about it. On the side of the real estate agency business, a lot of people are. I think it might not be a bad time right now to buy stock in certain public companies, brokerage companies. I'm not going to name the ones that I like better than others, but for a couple of reasons, I think that there's more fear out there than reality in it. Just because laws open up opportunity or precedent opens up opportunity for people to behave a certain way doesn't mean that they are going to behave that way, right? And what I fundamentally don't understand, and I'll open with this, I'll compare it. I'll kind of compare it parallel to RON, the Remote Online Notarization Act, and why? Because when Ron came out and when it started to slowly build, and then COVID obviously really like full
Right.
throttled
Hmm.
Ron. And for those of you that don't know, that's the Remote Online Notarization Act that struggled to get to be legal everywhere. And then all of a sudden with COVID, all of a sudden every state opened up their
So you
ability
don't
to
have to
Ron.
go to an office to close. You can close, wherever you want. They bring a tablet, things like that for you to sign.
Yep,
Or
you can do
just
real
all
estate settlements
email that.
remotely.
Yeah.
And it's great. There's a section of it. There's certain people that want to do that, and not everybody wants to do that. Probably more people want to do that than not, and that's great.
Yeah.
But I thought about it. Everyone's like, oh my god, this is going to change everything. Settlements are
Right.
going to be done totally remotely. Yeah. And my initial response to that was, I thought, wait a minute, who's actually making the decision? As a title company, we know that the lender, we can't do anything unless the lender, if the lender says you need documents in person, I have to sign documents. Right. I don't have control over that. And who's controlling the lender? The investors that are buying, not the warehouse lines, but the ultimate investors that are buying mortgage-backed securities are controlling that. And so why would they want to increase their risk, right? A non-in-person. And what are they getting in return for? What money are they getting in return? Nothing. So why would that ever actually happen? And I think that's played out pretty much. There's Ron thing that happens, but for the most part, certainly with conventional financing, it's not so popular. I think there's something similar here. If I'm selling a house, and I'd love to explore this. Like, this is a conversation. I want to know what you think of this.
Yeah.
Because I'm walking through my head, and what am I missing? If I'm selling a house, things tend to go where you throw money at. That's right. Yeah. So I want buyers that are represented, and that's another question about representation, and if that's a thing to do, whatever. To see my house. I want as many buyers to see this house as humanly possible so I can sell the thing and more people, better price, whatever. So if I don't offer money to representation of buyers, and we know most buyers are represented, then they're not going to want to show my house because they're not going to do it for free. So I'm going to have less buyers through my house, and I'm less likely to sell the house, or I'm less likely to get a good my price is less likely to be higher. So why would I want to do that? I don't understand why that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of thinking of it. I would put a huge caveat on that of depending on the market, right? Because in the market like we've been in lately, low in inventory, it's a lot of advantages to the seller. If a buyer is willing to waive an inspection, like many are when you're one of 50 offers, you're going to take that 3% buyer's commission on the chin, no problem, right? So maybe it lowers, the asking price and gets worked in, but honestly, I don't think it matters that much at the end of the day when this hyper competitive offer, a house that we put an offer on a year and a half ago went for $128,000 over ask, straight cash, right? And that was, that was probably like 30 some odd percent more than the list price, like a significant amount. So I think in certain markets, you're right. Like maybe it'll get kicked down to the buyer for now. Maybe the seller, takes it on. But what ends up happening now when it becomes more buyer friendly, when it becomes, something that buyers can negotiate?
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely market kind of, there's a supply demand thing there. I think the timing of this is interesting because this has kind of been slowly boiling for a long time, but and unplanned, not only the case, but the whole concept and, and the idea and just talking about it, but the idea that now we're entering this, what I see as probably a long-term situation of much more demand than supply for housing in America in general.
It's going to be a seller-friendly market for a long time.
Right. So we're now in this sort of macro situation where this could actually have some market effect, right? Not just the fact that we went through this craziness in 2020 and 2021, volume has come down. I think it's being artificially held down by high interest rates, and like at the end of the day, there's just no inventory. So that you're right, that may continue, and if anything, it'll create price compression for agents, and they'll have to share less of the pool of money. But buyers, agents, you're not being compensated to show a house to represent a buyer. Then then people are going to stop representing.
Right, and I actually talked to someone who's a realtor who she's out in Pittsburgh, and she's seeing 0% buyer listings there, and she doesn't show them right now.
Right. It's not showing them. Why would anyone show it? It doesn't make any sense.
If you have an agreement with your borrower, right, you're with your buyer, you go in and say, hey, in lieu, if the seller doesn't compensate me for the contract, then this is what you're going to have to pay.
Which I
Right?
think is the right way to do it.
Yes.
I think that buyers
Yeah.
should pay their agents. And
Mhm.
I think that buyers agents, for their sake, for their business, should be. If I were a buyer's agent, you're
Right.
running around like crazy, showing houses
Yeah.
at 9 o'clock. Like, you're wasting your time. You don't know if it's. I would go to my buyers and say, listen,
Right.
I'm going to do all this work for you. Now, what I do think is
Yeah.
I think that there's a problem with that. Start with the NAR and what's been going
Right.
on for years and years. I think people are whacking the wrong mole. I think they're going after the wrong problem, but maybe it'll solve it anyway. They're going after a price. I think a big problem is that the bar is so low to become a realtor, and the NARs, their business model for so long has been fees from MLS and realtor and association fee. So their goal is get as many realtors as possible, keep that bar really low, and just have high numbers. And I don't think that serves consumers well at all.
Right. Well, I think changing the commissions and changing what a typical realtor makes could affect that, right? It's kind of like following the money. You can't herd cats, but you can control where they eat. So if you're going to if now someone, doesn't say, hey, I sell, 3 houses a month, I'll be doing really well for myself. It's fine. Right. And you realize that's not the case as a realtor anyway, that starts to change. I was looking, doing a little research before this, and looking at basically every state now has done a similar, class action suit. And I think Ron's a good example because every state rules, can you do online notarizations or can't you? This is what's going to happen. Every state's realtor board is now coming through and saying, this is what we're going to do. This is what you're going to I know in New York, as of December 1st, I think they're making the brokerage pay directly or the seller pay directly?
I think that's what it is. I know that they're like the first movers really to actually enact laws around this.
And I think they're trying to do something, self-preservation. And they had mentioned in the article that was interesting. Apparently in Brooklyn specifically, it's more common for the buyers to negotiate with the buyer's realtor, and commissions hover around 1% there instead of 3%. But I mean, $1 million is a shoebox in Brooklyn anyway, so like that's 10 grand minimum. So it's a little bit different because of prices, but still, that's still below, more or less below the average that you see for realtor commissions. And like I said, I think it having those free markets, having that opportunity where someone can negotiate, makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, and I wonder if along those lines that if it comes that is more commonplace for buyers to be paying their buyer agents, that they'll be more, they're not just going to go with any buyer's agent, that, maybe they'll be a little bit more selective, and the quality of that agent is going to have to be better if they want to earn it. They're going to have to earn it actually. And so therefore the quality of general quality of realtors, which I think that's the big problem. Honestly.
Well, and I think that's a good question, brings up a good point, because the realtor I used a year and a half ago, we wouldn't have gotten our house without her. She was fantastic. And, begs the question, what do realtors do? Like, what is the role of a realtor that makes sense? For me, on the buyer side, it's knowing the markets, knowing the area, and then handling that kind of negotiation process.
Yeah. Yeah. A great realtor has a lot of value. And I think that, I'll tell you an interesting thing in a moment as a comparison, but like a great realtor has a ton of value, and a bad realtor can take value away from the situation.
Right.
And you could say that about an attorney. You could say that about a doctor. You could say that about an accountant.
Yeah.
You could say that about anybody.
A doctor will kill you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, great accountant's going to save you money, and a bad one's going to cost you. So you could say that about almost any profession. So that's just we're all big boys and girls. We have to decide, what we have to make our own decisions and decide if we're using people that are qualified and good. I went, interestingly, last week I was at the Real Deal. The Real Deal had a conference in Miami.
Yeah.
It's a great conference. They had some really great speakers. And one of the speakers was Marcos Lemonis. This guy, he's on CNBC. I like that guy. And he spoke about this among other things, but they asked him this question, and he had a response that I hadn't thought of, and I don't agree with, but it's worth sharing.
Yeah.
So he said two things about it. He said, number one, which I do agree with, he said, you've got people, like you see a lot, who do not have a stake in the game, but they're making decisions about about an economy here and how other people make their livelihood. And that's not good, and doesn't really work out well. I agree with that. Here's the part I don't agree with. In fairness, Marcus Lemonis' background, is in the auto industry. He came up and his primary business was through the auto industry and related kind of businesses. So he knows cars really, really well. What he said was, when you sell a car at a car dealership, the dealer is allowed to sell other products and services around the car. They have a relationship with the buyer, and they're allowed to capitalize on that relationship and sell them not only the car, but other things. Selling cars and selling houses is not the same. Cars are a product. It's a significantly more simpler transaction than buying a piece of real estate. And I think that so I agree with him in terms of and maybe in part on what he was saying was that a realtor schleps buyers around and they're taking them to these places and they're doing 9 o'clock at night and there's weekends or whatever, and they develop a relationship with the buyers, which I agree with. And then so why can't they capitalize on that relationship and not only sell the house but some other things too? I agree with that, actually. I don't think I disagree with that. I do agree. It makes a lot of logical sense. What I don't agree with is the complexity around real estate, that the immediate things are mortgage and title, and those things are hard and complicated. You need your own professionals for that.
I think he's 100% right, and I think that's what we're moving towards, to be honest. And, there's RESPA or not, right? There's been some ways that people have capitalized on that relationship, legal or not, over the years for sure. But I think that's where the opportunity lies, too.
Agreed.
We're quickly hitting our 20-minute mark here to put some thoughts on it. I think that's the opportunity. For example, if you're a mortgage company, you know what someone really needs when they go and get a house? A pre-qualification. So, hey, come to me, Matt, get your pre-qual. I have this guy, Jerry. He'll show you around. He's our realtor. Maybe he's on the payroll. Maybe he gets a 1% commission or something. But you're now bundling it in to the other services, whether it be mortgage, whether it be title. I think that's the opportunity. I think other players, because the realtor, the buyer's realtor, is always the first to the customer. They're always the one who can dictate title. In some cases, dictate mortgage, right? So that is an opportunity now for the title company, for the mortgage company to kind of replace that person, replace that service. A lot of people I talk to think we're going to a fixed fee realtor model, which I think would be great. Instead of a commission, you get X dollars if you help someone buy a house.
I think that's gonna, change. That'll really change that.
I think we're going to see big changes regardless. I think now that the buyers are going to be able to start to negotiate this, it's going to happen. Maybe not quickly, but a lot of people have told me they're already seeing it bleed in, right? From what they're seeing on listings and other things, like what the state governments are doing. It is already starting. And I think as we, eventually get out, somehow get out of the $6 million unit housing shortage that we have, there's going to be very drastic changes too.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree that it's not going to happen overnight. I think people are kind of trying to push that change and getting people to behave differently is the hard and the slow part. I think it will happen, but I mean, to be clear about that, I think that's already happening now, where those realtors control. They're pushing the thing down, and as long as I think that rules and laws around that are defined well, because what's happened in the past when it's not been done that way is that it's the wild, wild west in terms of legality and payoff central, and it gets real slimy. And I don't think you want this industry slimy, and I think you got to keep your eyes on that.
Slimier than it can be already, right? Yeah. And I think the problem too at this is, that consumer, right? Because part of the reason, realtors specifically don't want the buyer paying for this is getting a house is expensive. And now you're adding 5 figures in many cases to that upfront cost that they have. And people that no one really pays 20% anymore, but that just, the amount of money that you now need to get up front is going to increase. So does that mean people are going to not use a buyer realtor? Does that mean, you're going to finance the commission in some ways that may actually cost you way more money in the long run?
I think the answer to that is, which is a different topic for a different podcast, is that way more creative financing products is very, very much needed. And Fannie and Freddie within conventional lending needs to wake up and needs to look at longer term amortization and more, things that won't get our economy in trouble as they had. That people are having aversion to adjustable rates. We need to look at those things again, because I think that's the answer. And I don't hear much about it.
Yeah, because there's one thing that no one wants is to make it harder for someone to buy a house, right?
But it got harder.
I do think it probably it very well could, or be more risky if you stop using if you actually stop using, the trusted professionals that do add a
Right.
lot of value to the transaction. So,
Right. So
you know,
this is getting
we
interesting.
will see. Well, any final thoughts on this? I know I feel like this
No,
is
I mean,
probably one of some of our fastest recordings in terms of the way.
yeah, I could
So,
keep going because
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
lot to keep talking about, but
yeah,
it's all speculative and who
yeah,
knows what's going to happen and
right,
whatever. But I
yeah,
think that to a degree, we're headed in a good. I think for a long time, I've said like
yeah,
what the value
yeah,
and what it's worth in terms of being again great realtors
yeah,
and bad ones, and so I think the problem is I
yeah.
think we've addressed what I see as those problems, but
I think this is a good and natural change to the home buying
yeah,
process, and I think any person who's involved in the process, whether it be a loan officer, the title agent, the realtor, those roles are going to be very scrutinized over the next few years, and this is the beginning.
agreed.
So,
Yeah,
the
agreed.
question we do ask everyone this season, I forget if we did, is what's your LodeStar, right? What gets you so excited to go open these title offices, talk about this passionately? Um, you know, uh, where does the love for this industry and doing the work you do come from?
I think it's interesting work. I think,
Yeah.
in the title business in general is very underrated in terms of how kind of interesting these cases are and these things can be.
Mhm.
However, what gets me going honestly is that I'm in a field where it's complicated business
Yeah.
and logistically and just operationally, and
Hmm.
it's dusty and it's old, and
Yeah.
our competition mostly, not to knock on but our competition mostly is not doesn't operate in the way that I think
Yeah.
it should, efficiency and effectiveness. And I have this
Yeah.
this dream of how things should be. And so I always chase the how they should be.
Yeah.
And we all know that on the way to how they should be, sometimes we learn it's not so easy and you have to do things differently and shape. And
Right.
there's a puzzle and a chess game there. And
Yeah.
that's really fun to me. And so the
Mhm.
sort of the challenge and the struggle is business and how weak it can tend to be really gets me going in terms of
Yeah.
how good we want to be
Yeah.
to deliver what I think should be the
Yeah.
real estate buying experience for
No, I think
everyone.
that's great. Well, we'll wrap with that. I know Matt and everyone can find you at TitleEQ's website or Matt Einheber on LinkedIn. And the next time something blows up in the industry, which will definitely happen soon enough, we will bring you on for the market corner here. Appreciate
Great.
it. Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Jim. All
Thanks for
right.
listening, everyone.